From misunderstood borders to jaw-dropping misconceptions about continents, geography is packed with surprises. Interested? Well, I'm Mike with List 25, and here are ridiculous geography facts you won't believe. So, here's a big one people mix up very often: the UK and Great Britain. But using them interchangeably is actually wrong. So, let's get it straight. The Great Britain is basically the largest island in the British Isles. You know, the one with England, Scotland, and Wales? But how about Northern Ireland? No, it's not part of the Great Britain Club. You want to think of Great Britain as purely a geographic location, while the UK, or the United Kingdom of Great Britain, is more political. The UK is basically a union of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So, here's the trick to remembering. Great Britain means no Northern Ireland. The UK includes Northern Ireland. Got it? Good. Istanbul, Turkey is the only city in the world that spans 2 continents. Sitting proudly along the Bosphorus Strait, this city has one foot in Europe and the other in Asia. The strait itself connects the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara, but its real magic lies in its unique geography. Visitors flock to Istanbul to experience this rare phenomenon. Hop on a boat ride and you'll find yourself gazing at Europe on one side and Asia on the other. It's a geography buff's dream, and a selfie enthusiast's paradise. Few places can make you feel like a true globetrotter without ever leaving city limits. Iceland was apparently formed by powerful volcanic forces from under the earth, and because these forces don't exactly take a vacation, the island nation doesn't stay the same size. A fissure, or lava spewing crack, in the mid-Atlantic ridge below Iceland is slowly separating the Eurasian and North American tectonic plates. As this happens, the landmass is being stretched to breaking point, growing at a rate of approximately 5 centimeters annually. Why doesn't it break apart? Well, fresh magma flows up from beneath and plugs the gap. You've probably dreamed of visiting the world's tallest waterfall, maybe Angel Falls in Venezuela. But if you had checked with a geography expert before packing, you'd have ended up deep in the Atlantic Ocean instead. Why? Because the tallest waterfall on Earth isn't on land at all. It's underwater. That's the Denmark Strait Cataract, a massive underwater waterfall tucked between Greenland and Iceland. This underwater ridge is a whopping 11,500 feet. That's like stacking 3 Angel Falls together. So, what's going on down there? Arctic water is super cold and heavy, and when it flows south and meets warmer Atlantic water, it sinks hard. And it sinks right over the Denmark Strait Cataract Ridge, making it a proper waterfall. Now, with that height and volume, you'd expect a roaring rush, but it falls at just 1.6 feet per second. Slow, cold, and utterly wild. On the surface, it might not look like much, but down below, well, a whole lot is going down. But if you think that's strange, hold on, I am just getting started. Now, this threw me for a loop when I first discovered this fact. Do you mean to tell me that the legendary pyramids of Giza aren't actually sitting alone in the middle of a vast, endless desert? Sure, but we've all seen countless photos where the pyramids seem to be surrounded by nothing but sand, so what's really happening? Those pictures were a little misleading, although not entirely wrong. The pyramids are at the edge of the desert, just 200 meters from a Cairo neighborhood. There is in fact a golf course near the foot of the Cheops Pyramid. I wonder what it feels like to leave the busy streets and stroll into those fascinating ancient structures. Speaking of ancient structures, here's another surprising fact. Here's a geography brain bender for you. Reno, Nevada is further west than Los Angeles, California. Really? Even though Nevada is California's eastern neighbor and LA hugs the Pacific Ocean, Reno still wins the westward race. It's all thanks to the Southern California coastline, which bends southeast as it approaches Mexico. Geographically speaking, Reno is at 119 degrees 49 west, while Los Angeles trails behind at 118 degrees 14 west. That's a full degree and change in longitude, and it places Reno about 1.5 degrees, or roughly 83 miles or 134 kilometers farther west than LA. So Reno, famously dubbed the biggest little city in the world, actually enjoys slightly later sunsets than LA. By the time you finish watching this video, the vast Pacific Ocean will be a little less vast. How come? Well, it's those pesky tectonic plates again, shifting around. The largest is the Pacific Plate, which spreads across 39,876,000 square miles. Its edges are cutting down into the planet, with the edges of the other plates resting on top. This reduces space, and our planet can't replace the seafloor fast enough. The ocean mass contracts, making the ocean smaller as time goes on. Ever wondered if nature, like humans, has a split personality? Hurricanes sure seem to. In the northern hemisphere, they spin counterclockwise, but go south of the equator and they flip the script, spinning clockwise instead. Why don't they all follow the same pattern? Well, it's because of the Coriolis effect. As the Earth spins, anything moving across its surface, like air, gets gently nudged off course. In the north, that nudge sends storms swirling one way. In the south, it pushes them the other. So in the end, it's actually all physics. Or you could say it's like nature's very own hemisphere-specific choreography. And speaking of spinning, here's another head-spinning fact. You probably think of Egypt when you hear pyramids. Then maybe of conspiracy theories about aliens who built them. But what if I told you that the largest pyramid in the world isn't in Egypt? Wild, right? Actually, the largest pyramid is in Mexico, and it's called the Great Pyramid of Cholula. This ancient structure, called Tlachihualtepetl, is huge. It has a volume of 4.45 million cubic meters, almost twice that of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Who would have guessed? The world is full of places with names that make you do a double take. Let's start with Batman. Not the Cape Crusader, but a city in Turkey with nearly 500,000 people. Pair it with Gotham, Wisconsin, and you've got a match made in comic book heaven. Then there's Hell. Literally. Norway boasts a village named Hell that freezes over every winter, while Michigan has its own Hell, home to just 72 residents. No demons have been spotted yet, but the puns are endless. However, the gold medal for quirky names? That goes to boring Oregon, dull Scotland, and bland Australia. Together they form the tedious trio, proving geography is anything but dull. Before the land down under got its name, it was referred to as New Holland. The Dutch figured this be a great idea after becoming the first Europeans to lay eyes on it in the 17th century. Englishman Matthew Flinders circumnavigated the continent a couple hundred years later, after which it was known as Terra Australis, later simplified to Australia. I guess we're lucky he didn't call it Flindersland. Where does Santa retire to after a busy Christmas? Well, kids who believe in him say it's the North Pole. But if Santa were real, he wouldn't have a cozy little home at the North Pole. Why? Well, there's no land there. Yeah, that's right. It's all ice floating on the Arctic Ocean. Unlike Antarctica, which has a solid landmass, the North Pole is practically one huge ice sheet that expands when the months are cold. And when the summer heat comes in, it shrinks to about half its size. To add to this, from September to March, the North Pole experiences total darkness. This is called polar nights. So while Santa's reindeer might be magical, the North Pole isn't exactly the best spot for setting up a shop. No land, no light, just lonely ice and endless night. But if you think that's lonely, buckle up. Let's go to a part of Earth so isolated, the closest humans to it are floating in space. You think countries with massive land masses like Russia or Australia have the second longest coastline after Canada? Nope, it's Norway. Thanks to its jagged geography full of fjords and islands, Norway's coastline stretches over 58,000 kilometers. Fun fact, if stretched out, Norway's coastline would circle the Earth not just once, but more than 2.5 times. Being landlocked is tough, but being doubly landlocked? That's a very unique logistical nightmare. A doubly landlocked country not only has no direct access to the sea, but it's also completely surrounded by other landlocked nations. This leaves no straightforward route to a port, no easy sea trade, and a heavy reliance on neighbors who are also stuck inland. There are 2 countries that have it particularly bad: Liechtenstein and Uzbekistan. Tiny Liechtenstein is hemmed in by Austria and Switzerland, both landlocked as well. It doesn't produce much for exports, so it manages to get by. Uzbekistan, on the other hand, has it worse. With 5 landlocked neighbors, Afghanistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, it's like navigating an endless dry maze. It's ground level only if you want to view one of the 7 wonders of the world, Not even drones are permitted to capture the structure in all its glory. This is reportedly to help keep the air clean and avoid the effects of pollution. That no-fly zone extends for some 7.4 kilometers, though it doesn't include birds. Or actually insects who are in danger of staining the Monument Green with their buggy emissions. Though you can fly directly over it on Soarin' around the world at Epcot. If you've ever wanted to be totally cut off and out of reach, there's one place that gives you exactly that. I'm talking about a spot on Earth where the closest people to you are astronauts in space. No kidding, no joke. No other human gets anywhere near it. It's a point in the middle of the Pacific, over 1,450 miles from any land in any direction. Officially, it's called the Oceanic Pole of Inaccessibility. And get this, it is 34 times bigger than France. That sounds intense, right? Yeah, because it is. Point Nemo is quite literally in the middle of nowhere. Nemo in Latin? Well, that means no one. So how are astronauts the closest people to it? Think about it. When you're over 1,500 miles from another human being and the International Space Station flies at just 300 to 400 miles overhead, do the math. And yeah, your nearest neighbor is in orbit. Chances are you won't be going there, so here's another fact to memorize for trivia night. Did you know California is one of the few places on Earth with various climate types packed into one state? You've got the desert, Mediterranean, cold continental, and polar. Here's the awesome part. This climate diversity is why California grows nearly half of America's fruits and veggies. To add to this, California has two extreme geographical features. Mount Whitney at 14,505 feet above sea level, the highest point, and Badwater Basin in Death Valley at 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point. Talk about a state with an impressive range. California really has it all. If you watch our videos regularly, you'll know that Antarctica isn't just the world's biggest desert, it's also the coldest, covering an incredible 5.5 million square miles, or 14.2 million square kilometers. That's significantly larger than the Sahara, which comes in at 3.5 million, or 9 million square kilometers. Deserts are defined by how dry they are, not how hot, and both poles qualify. In fact, Antarctica also holds the record when it comes to extreme temperatures, having once reached negative 128 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 88.9 Celsius. When it comes to dryness, though, the Atacama Desert in Chile wins hands down. With only 0.03 inches or 0.076 centimeters of rain per year, it's so barren that NASA uses it to study Mars-like conditions. Which really says it all, doesn't it? Everyone's heard of the Philippine Islands out in Southeast Asia. Well, at least I hope you have. However, did you know that the Philippines contains an astonishing 7,000 islands? And that's actually just an estimate, by the way. Some sources state around 7,100, others close to 8,000. Plus, only a couple of thousand or so islands are populated, throwing up some mysteries as to what's going on with those other few thousand. If you have a fear of heights, just standing next to a 5-story building can make your palms sweat. But nature has its own way of cranking up that fear, and it's Mount Thor on Baffin Island, Canada. This mountain is Earth's greatest vertical drop, going down an insane 4,101 feet. That's like falling off the entire height of the Burj Khalifa, with plenty of time to reconsider all your life choices before you hit anything. But then, this isn't even the tallest mountain, so how does it get such a massive drop? Well, unlike most mountains that have a sloped descent, Mount Thor has a nearly perfect vertical line, dropping straight down from peak to base. If you were to jump off, it would take around 26 seconds before you land on anything. Now, let's shift gears and head southeast to France, where another jaw-dropping geography fact awaits. For many people, when they think of Canada, what comes to mind is maple syrup, hockey, and polite people. For others, it's the world-class city of Toronto, Canada's most populous city. But is it the capital? No, that honor belongs to Ottawa. And no, it's not Vancouver either, so nice try. Ottawa is a much more quiet and less flashy city when compared to Toronto, but it's where all the big decisions are made. Interestingly, it has been the capital of the country as far back as 1857. Fun fact, Queen Victoria herself picked Ottawa as the capital. Why? Strategic location. It's far enough from the US border to dodge trouble. So while Toronto shines bright, Ottawa quietly keeps the gears turning. Just one more thing about deserts since I'm on the subject. Did you know some of them sing? In places like the Gobi and the Sahara, you can witness a phenomenon called singing sand dunes. These dunes produce sounds ranging from faint whispers to deep resonant booms as sand grains slide down steep slopes, creating vibrations that generate the sound. But it's not random. The sand has to be dry, silica-rich, and in just the right humidity. Scientists believe that the size of the grains and their movement speed affect the pitch, so bigger grains produce deeper, lower tones, while small grains create higher-pitched sounds. That's the approximate number of languages spoken in Papua New Guinea. Not bad at all for the world's third largest island country. Located in the southwestern Pacific, its settlers are the Papuans, who landed there around 40,000 years ago. Many of those hundreds of languages belong to the Papuans. Most countries stay loyal to one continent, but France, it said non merci to that. Instead, it went on a global shopping spree, planting flags on 6 of the world's 7 continents like it was building its own world tour. It all goes back to the age of empires. Back in the colonial era, France was in full empire building mode. After World War II, many former colonies gained independence, but some opted to stay linked to France as overseas departments and territories. So, from French Guiana in South America, islands in the Caribbean, North America, Réunion and Mayotte near Africa, to the Pacific holdings like New Caledonia and French Polynesia and Oceania, and even Adélie Land in Antarctica, France's reach is as global as it gets. A country that sort of hits select all on the world map. But I am just getting started. From a country on several continents, let's head to the land of borders, because the longest one in the world lies between 2 countries you might not expect. Holland or the Netherlands? What's the difference? Oh, a lot, actually. First, Holland is actually only a part of the Netherlands, not the entire country. That'd be like calling the United States Texas. It's that bad. Holland is made up of North Holland and South Holland, which are only 2 out of the 12 provinces in the country. Now, these provinces are quite popular, with cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague. So here's the thing. During the golden age of this country, the Holland provinces were so notable that they became synonymous with the Netherlands. But technically, if you're not in those 2 provinces, well, you're not in Holland. We all know Russia is the largest country in the world. But just how big is it? Well, for starters, it covers an astonishing 6.6 million square miles. That's 17.1 square kilometers. To put that into perspective, the US, a huge country in our own right, only spans 3.8 million square miles, or 9.8 million square kilometers. Russia is so enormous, it accounts for over 1/8 of all the land on Earth. Its sheer size means it needs 11 time zones to keep up with its massive expanse. When it's sunrise in Moscow, it's sunset in the Far East. In total, Russia shares its land with 16 other countries, which is a big part of why it holds such a powerful and complex role on the global stage. Ringing in the new year gets a little confusing in the Polynesian island country of Samoa. Prior to 2011, you'd be right down the list for celebrations due to the time zone. There's a way around that, of course, changing your time zone, which is precisely what happened. Adopting the Australia and New Zealand time zone meant it popped those champagne corks a whole lot earlier. Why did they do this? All for trade reasons. In the process, they lost a day. But you know what? Who cares when there's money to be made? When you think of a border, you probably picture a tight, tense line guarded like a secret. But the US-Canadian border? It's more like a neighborly nod across a massive backyard. At 5,525 miles, or 8,891 kilometers, it is the largest international border in the world. That's longer than a round-trip road trip from New York to LA, with a couple of snack breaks and sightseeing detours. But it gets interesting. Despite its size, the US-Canada border has few armed patrols. Just lakes, forests, and small towns. It weaves through 13 US states and 8 Canadian provinces and territories, cutting across everything from snowy wilderness to remote mountains. Some say it's the longest undefended border in the world, but that's mostly because it's compared to the United States-Mexico border, which gets a lot of drama. But you want to know what else Canada has in store for us? You've probably heard the phrase, everything's bigger in Texas. Well, that could be right for big cowboy hats and big attitude, but for the state's size, it might be a little exaggerated. And I say only a little because Texas is actually big. 678,000 square kilometers is really big. But Alaska blows it out of the water. Alaska is a whopping 1.5 million square kilometers. And if you're big on math, then you know that's roughly twice as large as Texas. So while Texas might dominate the lower 48, The crown for the largest US state belongs to the frozen north. Canada takes the crown for having the longest coastline on Earth, a mind-blowing 151,000 miles or 243,042 kilometers. For comparison, Indonesia, the runner-up, has 33,554 miles or 54,000 kilometers, and Russia trails at 23,612 miles or 38,000 kilometers. Given Canada's size, second largest in area, and its numerous islands stretching along its Arctic coastline, it's no wonder. But Canada also has the most lakes in the world, with 879,800 scattered across the country. That's more than every other country combined. In fact, over 60% of the world's 1.4 million lakes are in Canada. Russia comes in second, but honestly, it's not even close. Did you know that not every country follows an hourly time zone? You can have half-hourly zones, something that's known as an offset zone. And in the case of Nepal, they observe a quarter-hourly zone. 15 minutes? That's going to cause some confusion, and indeed it does. Being next door to India, it's created a long-running joke where Indians view Nepalese as 15 minutes late for everything, which I guess they pretty much are. If asked to name a desert, chances are you're going to say Sahara, and your mind pictures dry ground with scorching heat, sand dunes, and maybe a camel or two. But plot twist, the largest desert in the world isn't even hot at all. It's frozen solid and covered in ice. That's Antarctica. How does that make sense? Well, a desert is any region that gets very little moisture, usually less than 10 inches of rain or snow a year. And guess what? Antarctica matches that criteria a little too perfectly. And so, with a size of about 5.5 million square miles, it's officially the largest desert in the world, bigger than the Sahara by a long shot. Now, let's leave Antarctica behind and dive into the Pacific, straight into the deepest place on Earth. When you think of New York's biggest attractions, the Statue of Liberty tops the list. But here's the twist. The statue actually sits on New Jersey waters. Let me explain. In 1834, there was a Supreme Court case, New Jersey versus New York. This case ruled the boundary between these cities at the Hudson River's midpoint, placing Liberty Island in New Jersey. So, while Liberty Island itself was ruled to be part of New York, the water around the island belongs to New Jersey. This means that while the Statue of Liberty is closely tied to New York, geographically, it's sitting in New Jersey. Fun fact number 1, the Dead Sea isn't a sea at all. It's actually a hypersaline lake, and its salt concentration is off the charts. And that was fun fact number 2. Almost 10 times saltier than the ocean, it's one of the saltiest bodies of water in the world. Its high salinity makes it incredibly buoyant, so much so that you can float on the surface without swimming or treading water. This unique lake also holds the title of the lowest point on Earth, if, altitude facts are your thing. One tip though, don't drink the water. It might be safe for your skin, but consumption is definitely not recommended. Some of the craziest geography facts out there involve islands. For example, Semisopochnoi is an Alaskan island found approximately 2,500 kilometers from Anchorage. It starts in the eastern hemisphere and ends in the west. No one lives there, which is just as well because the island is volcanic. The name translates as Island of the Seven Mountains, and each of these is made of hardened lava. If you took Mount Everest and flipped it upside down, then dropped it into the Pacific Ocean, into the Mariana Trench, you still wouldn't have filled up the Mariana Trench. Let that sink in for a moment. This spot was first found in 1875 during the Challenger expedition, a mission to map the oceans. Back then, they used the old school method, tossing a weighted rope into the water. At least 5 miles deep, they'd figured they'd hit the bottom and left. But in 1951, sonar revealed the real story. It wasn't just deep. It was the deepest place on the planet. The trench is a scary 36,070 feet. That's almost 7 miles down. Its deepest point is called the Challenger Deep, and it's so remote, so pressure-packed, it's basically Earth's version of outer space, just colder, darker, and underwater. We've sunk nearly 7 miles beneath the sea. Now let's climb out of the trench, step onto land, and head for one place where Earth reaches up to brush the edge of space. Yes, it's true. Taiwan isn't part of the People's Republic of China. But this is one of the most debated topics in modern geopolitics. First, you should know that Taiwan is a fascinating country in its own right. It has its own government, its own leaders, and even its own tech empire. Yet, the PRC insists it's only a rebellious province that has refused to unify. To understand a bit of what's happening, let me give you a little geography lesson. So, the ruling party in China is the PRC, People's Republic of China. But keep in mind there's also another party called the Republic of China, ROC. So back then, before the Chinese Civil War, the ROC was the main government of China, but when the Communist Party took over in 1949, the ROC fled to Taiwan. Well, now we've got two Chinas, one claiming the other isn't legit. It's definitely awkward. So Taiwan functions just like any other country, but most of the world under pressure from China won't officially recognize it as a country. So while China keeps saying, you belong to us, Taiwan just rolls its eyes and gets back to being one of the most advanced places on Earth. The Netherlands has more bicycles than people, and I'm not just throwing empty words out there. With 18 million residents and 22 million bikes, this Western European nation is a cyclist's paradise. They literally have a bike for every person, plus millions more, just in case. This just shows how committed the Netherlands is to sustainable living. Cities like Amsterdam have prioritized bike-friendly infrastructure, making cycling easier and more convenient than driving in many urban areas. Biking isn't just a mode of transportation here, it's a way of life. It keeps the air cleaner, the streets less crowded, and the people healthier. Here's a startling fact: over 60% of Canadians are based south of Seattle. How is that even possible? Actually, the truth is fairly simple. When we look at a map, it's a map. Maps are an easily digestible version of our planet's appearance. They're both accurate and not accurate. We use them to get around effectively, yet they don't totally reflect the landscape that's actually there. Canada is more lopsided than it looks. Apologies to any Canucks who are watching. If aliens were to beam you up to their spaceship and needed the closest point to space to pick, where do you think they'd choose? Well, it's not Mount Everest. The perfect spot will be Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador, the closest point to space on Earth. But Chimborazo isn't the tallest mountain, so how did it earn that title? Well, here's why. You see, Earth isn't a perfect sphere. It's slightly squished at the poles and bulges at the equator. And Chimborazo almost sits right on that bulge. So when you measure from the center of the Earth, Chimborazo sticks out farther than Everest ever could. That makes it the highest mountain on Earth by that measure, and the peak nearest to outer space. It's the kind of place where you can literally say you are on top of the world. Standing there high above the Earth, just a little closer to the stars, you don't just feel like a hero, you feel like the final shot of an epic movie. Now that I've hinted at Earth's shape and how it's more of a squash sphere than a perfectly round ball, let's look into another fascinating detail about how this spinning globe of ours behaves. Did you know that Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, is closer to Mumbai than to Baghdad? It's true. Many people think Afghanistan is part of the Middle East, but it's actually more connected to South Asia. Here's why. Afghanistan shares a border with Pakistan, known as the Durand Line, and they even have shared rivers, like the Kabul River, which flows into the Indus. The history between this landlocked country and South Asia goes back to old trade routes, shared empires like the Mughals, and cultural ties in food and language. Australia is the only continent on Earth without an active volcano. Even Antarctica, with its extreme conditions, has active volcanoes, like Mount Erebus and Mount Sidley, and it all boils down to location. Australia sits right in the middle of the massive Indo-Australian tectonic plate, safely away from the plate boundaries, where volcanic activity typically occurs as the Earth's crust shifts and grinds. Interestingly enough, the Pacific Ring of Fire, a hotspot for volcanic and seismic activity, runs just to the north and east of Australia. It's kind of ironic that nearby countries like Indonesia and Papua New Guinea frequently have to deal with eruptions, while Australia enjoys geological stability. Mountains can be pretty ancient, that much we know. But what is the planet Earth's oldest mountain range? That giddy height is reached by the Machondwa Mountains at a staggering 3.5 billion years or so. Located in the Barberton Greenstone Belt over 300 kilometers east of Johannesburg, Barberton is a town. Its mountains are colored green from plant life, hence the name Greenstone. You've probably been taught in science class that the Earth spins on its axis, but that's not the complete truth. Earth doesn't just spin, it wobbles too. Remember spinning a globe as a kid and watching it wobble off course? That's basically the same idea, except Earth's wobble happens incredibly slowly. This slow shift is known as axial precession. Just like it takes 365.25 days for Earth to complete its revolution, a full wobble cycle takes about 26,000 years to complete. Over time, Earth's axis drifts about 4 inches per year. It may not sound like much, but after a century, that's 11 yards. While this wobble doesn't mess with your day-to-day life, it affects things like the North Star's position and Earth's climate over long periods. Now, since I'm on the topic of slow, sneaky movements happening beneath your feet, here's another fact that just might help you win trivia night. When you take a look at a regular map, it makes Greenland look huge, even as big as Africa. But that's because these maps distort the size of land masses near the poles. In reality, although Greenland is big, it's only about 2.1 million square kilometers. And that's much smaller than Africa, which is 30 million square kilometers. This slight distortion creates a bit of a geographical optical illusion. So while Greenland is a huge frozen wonderland, what we see on maps is a bit misleading. Sticking with Australia, it's a fascinating place, prosperous and developed, but its geography isn't exactly friendly. If you look at a population density map, it's pretty clear. Almost everyone lives in the urban hubs of the south and southeast, while the rest of the country is basically empty. That's because most of Australia is made up of harsh, arid land that's tough to live in. From deserts to tropical forests, much of the country simply isn't built for people. And as the driest continent on Earth, Australia is facing a serious water crisis. Even cities like Sydney and Melbourne are getting less rain than usual, which is a big deal for a place already struggling with droughts. America's Golden State has a population of around 39 million, which sounds like a lot, and it certainly beats Canada, which has approximately 36 million. Both places have their pros and cons, but when you consider that one is a state and the other is an entire country, then that really puts things into perspective. You ever skip trimming your nails for a little while and suddenly you just felt like Wolverine? Hopefully not. But your fingernails aren't the only things growing at a snail's pace unnoticed. The continents are too. That's right, they're slowly drifting apart about the same rate as your nails grow, about 1 to 2 inches per year. But before you start panicking, rest assured this is a super slow process. So your favorite beach isn't going to disappear tomorrow. But over millions of years, this adds up to some serious changes. So if you had a map of Earth with a time-lapse camera watching it over millions of years, you'd see continents drifting apart or crashing into each other, forming mountain ranges and new ocean basins. Alright, it's time to switch things up a bit. You started watching this video looking for geography facts to make you sound like an expert. Well, I did the thorough work and research, and so far, you've gotten 12 solid ones. I think I deserve a sub for that, yeah? Go ahead, hit that bell button. Thank you guys so much. Now, let's get back to it. Here's another geography fact to blow your mind. Most fact lovers know South Africa for its blend of cultures and its beautiful coastal beaches. But only a few know that the country doesn't have one capital, it has 3. What's interesting is that they play different roles. Cape Town is the legislative capital. Pretoria is the administrative capital. Bloemfontein is the judicial capital. But you might have heard of Johannesburg a lot more than these places. That's because it's the largest city and the country's economic hub, but it's not one of the capitals. So next time someone mentions South Africa's capital, you better ask, which one? Indonesia's geography is truly unique. With over 18,000 islands, it's the largest archipelago in the world. And managing so many islands is no simple task. For centuries, Indonesian kingdoms struggled to connect their lands, especially compared to places like Europe where travel was easier. With so many diverse cultures and communities spread across the islands, bringing them together under one national identity remains a challenge even to this day. On top of that, Indonesia sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire. The country has 136 volcanoes, 61 of which have erupted since 1900. All in all, the region's tectonic activity is so intense that Indonesia experiences earthquakes of magnitude 5.0 or lower almost every day. There was another place called Philadelphia, and believe me, it was very different. Jordan's capital Amman was given the name by King Ptolemy II Philadelphus from Egypt after he seized it in the 3rd century BCE. The Greek king Eumenes II also established a place in Turkey called Philadelphia in the pharaoh's honor around 189 BCE. Eumenes and his brother Attalus II provided the inspiration for that city of brotherly love that we know today. If you've ever seen The Hobbit, then you definitely remember Smaug, the fire-breathing dragon in a cave piled high with gold. Well, it turns out Earth might just out-hoard that dragon. Our planet has its own secret treasure stash. And here's where it gets wild. Scientists estimate there's so much gold hidden deep inside Earth that if we could get it all, we could literally coat the entire planet in a shiny layer of golden armor. Right now, we know about 244,000 metric tons of gold in the Earth's crust. But some geologists think there's way more, like 1.6 quadrillion tons buried in the core. And that's a quadrillion with a Q. So even if we only had access to the known stash, Earth could still get a full-on golden glow-up. I'm telling you, Smaug would be jealous. Now how about a fact that'll make you sound like a nerd when you get to say it? When you think of deserts, scorching sands on a vast wasteland does come to mind. But it doesn't always have to be so. Basically, a desert is known for low rainfall, not particularly heat. It doesn't necessarily have to be hot and sandy like the Sahara. Now, the frozen ice-covered Antarctica receives less than 20 millimeters of rain annually, making it the largest desert and driest continent in the world, as it covers 14 million square kilometers. Egypt's geography has always been its lifeline. The fertile plains of the Nile Delta made it one of the cradles of civilization. But everything changed with the construction of the Suez Canal in 1868. The man-made waterway connects the Mediterranean and Red Seas, cutting out the need for European ships to sail around the entire African continent to reach Asia. It was a game changer for global trade, but brought plenty of political turmoil along with it. Since then, Egypt has been at the center of major conflicts tied to control of the canal, from the Suez Crisis in 1956 to the Arab-Israeli War in 1967, and access to the waterway remains a heated issue in the region. Now that might sound like some weird Disney movie, but it really isn't. Daylight saving ensures that while the sun sets a little too quickly for our liking, we can always adjust the clocks to compensate. Over in Arizona, however, things are startlingly different. There, you don't follow daylight saving, unless you belong to the Navajo people who live in the Northeast. And this makes things complicated for the Hopi people who do follow daylight saving. Because they're surrounded by the Navajo Nation, they're locked inside what's called a daylight saving donut. Ever wonder what it'd be like if every day was like summer? Constant sunshine, no clouds and no rain? I mean, sounds perfect, right? But eventually you'd crave a break from the heat and start missing the rain. Well, far away at the bottom of the globe in Antarctica, there's a place where it hasn't rained or snowed in over 2 million years. Yes, the dry valleys. While the rest of Antarctica is covered in ice, this region's land has also stuck to the extreme, remaining totally dry. There's been no rainfall at this location in 2 million years, which means that there hasn't been any precipitation in the dry valleys at any point since humans existed. Stuff like this really makes you appreciate where you are on the planet. Let's move on from that to another surprising fact. For centuries, the Atlantic Ocean has been one of the busiest, most renowned waterways. This ocean has played a major role in propelling world economies. So it's not strange that most people consider it the biggest ocean in the world. But that's not true. That title goes to the Pacific. The Pacific is over 63 million square miles, and for context, that's more than double the size of the Atlantic. Not only does it cover more surface area, but it also holds about half of the planet's water, so put some respect on its name. If you look at China's history, one thing becomes clear. Internal strife and conflict have been constant themes. From the massive Taiping Rebellion to countless civil wars, the country has seen its fair share of turmoil. But this isn't a history list. China's geography has a lot to do with it. Most of the population has traditionally lived in the fertile lowlands, while the surrounding highlands, dry and sparsely populated, have served as a natural buffer against northern invaders. Adding to the complexity, China's vast territory is home to many ethnic groups and cultures with differing interests. Welcome to Pheasant Island, which got its name via France. Located in Europe, it's part of the Andai, a resort in French Basque country. So it's in France, right? Well, some of the time. You see, it's also near the Spanish border, and every few months a geographical swap is performed where Pheasant Island becomes part of Spain. This is because of a peace treaty signed between the two countries in 1659. If you were told you had over $1 million, but in your entire lifetime you'd only get to spend about $7,000, that would kill the joy real quick, right? Now imagine that same disappointment, but with water. About 71% of Earth's surface is covered in water, but only 0.007% of it is actually available for human use. That's it. The rest? Either saltwater in the oceans or locked away where we can't touch it. To take it even further, of all that water on Earth, only 2.5% is fresh water. And even then, the vast majority of that is stuck in glaciers, ice caps, or buried deep underground. In the end, less than 1% of that 2.5% is easily accessible. So while it may seem like we're swimming in abundance, the reality is that what we're working with is much like a handful of sand when there's an entire beach. For the next fact, let's go to the one place where water is not scarce. It's a full-on deluge, like Noah's Ark level of downpours all over again. If you ever wondered what the biblical flood might have looked like on replay, Mawsynram, India, gives you a pretty solid preview. Greenland is truly fascinating. It's the second largest body of ice in the world, just after Antarctica. If you never knew that, you should also know that it's a self-governing territory. But it's not a fully independent country. That means, since 1979, Greenland has remained part of Denmark and is dependent on it in many ways. For instance, Denmark retains control over every foreign affair, defense, and monetary policy regarding Greenland. But that's not all. Denmark also covers about 2/3 of Greenland's budget. So while it seems like a country on its own, Greenland is technically under Denmark's rule. Almost 70% of Japan's land is covered by mountains and hills, leaving only 20% of the country's land flat enough to farm or build on. That means Japan has some of the most tightly packed cities in the world, with urban areas squeezing into that small sliver of usable land. And while that might sound like a challenge, and it is, the mountainous terrain also makes Japan incredibly unique. The mountains have given the country its famous hot springs, dramatic landscapes, and stunning hiking trails. Plus, they've shaped Japanese culture, from terraced rice farming on steep slopes to centuries of folklore. Take a swim in the Sargasso Sea and you'll never reach land. Why not? Because the borders of this water mass are inside the Atlantic Ocean. They don't call it the wide Sargasso Sea for nothing. This is great news for the sargassum, a seaweed which spends its day floating around. What better place to do that than the sea that pretty much doesn't end? This little village is the wettest place on Earth. And I'm being as literal as I can. On average, Mawsynram gets drenched by around 467 inches of rainfall every year. That's not just a lot. That's absurd. Imagine the rain stacking up to the height of a 4-story building. Yeah, it's that serious. But if you think that's extreme, 1985 said, "Hold my cloud." Mawsynram clocked in at over 1,000 inches of rainfall. That's more water than New York, London, and Tokyo combined get in a whole year. If you stepped out, you wouldn't need an umbrella, you'd need an ark. Still feels distant? Well, on June 17th, 2022, Mawsynram received 1,003.6 millimeters of rain in just 24 hours. That's like a month's worth of rain from 10 cities falling all at once on one tiny village. We've had enough rain to sink a city. Now let's dry off and pack up, because we're leaving the floodplains of Mawsynram to travel roughly 5,300 miles southeast, straight into the heart of sun-baked Australia. We can all agree that Alaska is a land of extremes. It's widely known for its extreme temperatures and disasters. But here's something even more shocking. It's both the westernmost and the easternmost state in the US. How is this possible? Well, it all comes down to the Aleutian Island chain. This is a chain of islands that stretches far into the Pacific Ocean. Let's break it down. These islands cut across the 180th meridian, the invisible line that splits the eastern and western hemispheres. Because of this, parts of Alaska technically sit in the eastern hemisphere, making it the easternmost state. But at the same time, the majority of Alaska remains in the western hemisphere, equally giving it the westernmost title. Well, like I said, Alaska is all about extremes. India is massive, with every kind of landscape you can imagine. But even for a country so explored, it still has its mysteries. One of the most fascinating is Meghalaya in the northeast, home to some of the largest caves in the world. Krempuri, for one, is the world's longest sandstone cave, stretching over 24,000 meters, or 79,000 feet. Then there's Krem Umlada, found more recently in February 2019. This cave features a 105 meter or 334 foot deep entrance shaft, making it one of India's deepest known shaft caves. And that's just the start. Experts believe Meghalaya's cave network is much larger than we could possibly imagine. It's a hidden underground world just waiting to be explored. While images of dehydration and sunburn in the Sahara are easy to imagine, there's another side to this enormous stretch of sand. Occasionally, It snows out there. A mountainous area called Ain Sefra, or Yellow Spring, can experience snowy conditions thanks to a weather phenomenon known as anticyclones, which carry moisture into the Atlas Mountains. Snow has become a little more frequent in Ain Sefra, though you'd have to go back to the late 70s for dramatic events such as a snowstorm. The Rock might be a former WWE star turned Hollywood icon, but the actual Rock that deserves that title? It's not in a ring or a movie set. It's in Australia. Mount Augustus. And this isn't just a rock. It is the largest rock on the planet. Now, don't let the name trick you one bit. It is not a mountain. It is one colossal slab of stone that towers over 2,300 feet high and spans across a jaw-dropping 28 miles. That is nearly half the size of New York City, just flattened into one giant chunk of rock. It's so massive, you can spot it from nearly 100 miles away. Think that's impressive? Hold on. Mount Augustus has been around for 1.65 billion years. That means this rock was lounging out here long before dinosaurs were even a thing, long before Julius Caesar ever thought of crossing the Rubicon. So yeah, we're not just talking about a rock. What we have is a time capsule too. Just how cool is that? But let's go somewhere even cooler. From billion-year-old rocks to the belly of the earth, we're diving underground to uncover another silent giant. If you think the farthest distance between two US points is somewhere on the mainland, think again. Geographically, the farthest distance falls between 2 points, and surprisingly, they bear the same name, Point Udall. While one sits on St. Croix in the US Virgin Islands, the easternmost point of the US territory, the other is located out on Guam in the Pacific, the westernmost point. But here's the shocking part. The straight line distance between these two locations is approximately 9,500 miles. For context, this is roughly the same as flying from New York to Sydney. That's just wild. The hill known as Tamatataki Tani Hangako o Atamatea Toripoka Kakapiki Manga Horanoku Paki Fenu Aki Tanatahu in New Zealand is famous for having one of the longest geographical names in the world, 85 letters long. The Maori name translates to place where Tamatea, the man with the big knees who slid, climbed, and swallowed mountains known as Landeater, played his flute to his loved one. For years, it was considered the longest name, and the Guinness Book of Records still lists it as such. However, it's been overtaken by the official ceremonial name of Bangkok, Thailand. Krungtep Mahanakon Aman Ratanakosin Mahintara Ayutataya Mahadilok Pop Naparat Rachachani Boriram Udam Rachaniwet Mahasatan Aman Piman Awatan Satit Sakatitaya Watsunakam Prasit, which comes in at an incredible 163 letters, and means the city of angels, the great city, the eternal jewel city, the impregnable city of god Indra, the grand capital of the world endowed with 9 precious gems, the happy city abounding in an enormous royal palace that resembles the heavenly abode where reigns the reincarnated god, a city given by Indra and built by Vishnu Karma. Or just Bangkok. We call this Thai location Bangkok. But what's its authentic name? Well, one thing I can definitely say is that it contains a startling 163 letters. I didn't even fit that on an envelope. This is actually probably a subject for a different video. Anyway, our writer thought we should just present the name on screen for you in all its glory, but that's not how I do things. So, Krungtep Mahanakon Aman Ratanakosin Mahintara Ayutaya Mahadilok Pop Naparat Ratachani Boriram Utom Rachaniwet Mahasanaton Aman Piman Awatan Satit Sakatitawe Watsanikam Prasit. Damn! Oh, and just in case you don't know what that means, the city of angels, the great city, the eternal jewel city, the impregnable city of god Indra, the grand capital of the world endowed with 9 precious gems, the happy city abounding in the enormous royal palace that resembles the heavenly abode where reigns the incarnated god, a city given by Indra and built by Vishnu Karma. Or just Bangkok. So. Back in 1797, a 10-year-old boy named Houchin went hunting. Yeah, it's wild, I know. According to legend, he struck a bear, but the bear didn't go down so easily. So, Houchin chased the wounded beast deep into the woods, until he stumbled upon something even more spine-chilling than the bear, the yawning mouth of Mammoth Cave. Now, whether or not that tale holds up is debatable, but what's not up for debate is that Mammoth Cave is the largest cave system in the world. Since its discovery, it's passed through many hands before officially becoming a national park in 1926. But you know what's wild? Only approximately 400 miles of this gigantic underground cave have been explored so far. To put that into perspective, Mammoth Cave could easily fit 26 Empire State Buildings laid flat along its discovered distance. And get this, scientists believe there are still another 200 miles left untouched. Here's another mind-boggling one. Sure, it's located in North Africa, but it's one of those unique places that actually crosses continental borders. The Suez Canal serves as the clear dividing line between Asia and Africa, and Egypt's territory extends beyond the canal into the Sinai Peninsula, making it a true transcontinental country. For Egypt, its geographical position gives it many advantages, including access to global markets, connectivity, and a competitive position in logistics. From its ancient ruins to its present-day bustling cities, you can see the beautiful fusion of both African and Middle Eastern cultures. Much has been said about North Sentinel Island and its uncontacted tribe, especially after a missionary lost his life trying to make contact in 2018. A lot of people think that they're the only uncontacted people left in the world, but that's far from true. The Javari, who live deep in the Amazon's Javari Valley, have also resisted all attempts at communication, and their isolation is for good reason. Tribes like the Javari are vulnerable to diseases that the rest of us have developed immunity to, and even brief contact could be catastrophic for them. Sadly, they still face threats from outsiders like gold miners, further reinforcing their need to remain undisturbed. The tectonic plates on which we all sit aren't the most stable of things. I mean, would you be jostling against your neighbor sometimes with volcanic results? In 2016, a fast and furious effect was noticed by scientists. The closer a plate gets to breaking apart, the speedier it becomes. And by speedy, I mean the time a fingernail takes to grow. It may not look full throttle to you, but when it comes to our planet splitting apart, wouldn't you rather be on a slow go? A sea with no coastline sounds made up, right? That's like saying a house with no walls or a roof. But it's real, and it's called the Sargasso Sea. It sits right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, completely surrounded by water. No beaches, no shores, no land at all. Instead, it's held together by ocean currents. The Gulf Stream on one side, the Canary Current on the other, and a couple more doing the rest of the work. You could describe it as the introvert of the sea world. No visitors or surfers. Its only companion besides ocean currents is a whole lot of floating seaweed called sargassum lying on top of it. And sure, you can tell where the sea got its name from. But now we move on from a sea having no coastline to something that would leave you confused and amazed all at once. Crater Lake is recorded as the deepest lake in the United States, and it goes as deep as 1,949 feet. But here's the impressive part. This ancient lake is over 7,000 years old and was born from Mount Mazama's fiery eruption. Its waters are so pure they rank among the clearest on Earth. But that's not all. Adding to its allure are two islands, Wizard Island and the eerie Phantom Ship. If you ever get to visit Crater Lake National Park in Oregon, just remember that it's over 800 feet deeper than the Eiffel Tower is tall. San Marino, tucked away inside Italy, proudly holds the title of the world's oldest constitutional republic. It was founded way back in 301 by Saint Marinus, a Christian stonemason fleeing persecution under Roman Emperor Diocletian. In fact, its constitution, written in 1600, is still in effect, making it the oldest written constitution in the world. The tiny republic has managed to stay independent over the centuries thanks to its strategic alliances and mountainous terrain, a legacy that has over 1,700 years of independence and tradition behind it. And I don't mean walking to the airport in the US, getting on a plane, and hitting ground on Russian soil. I am talking about a continuous path. Do you need to walk underwater? No. You see, there's a point between the two long-standing enemies that's a mere 2.5 miles long. Here, the Bering Strait takes you from Alaska to Siberia, and in freezing conditions, the water has been known to freeze over, enabling someone to walk from the island of Little Diomede to its Russian counterpart, Big Diomede. You know the whole painter painting himself painting a painting, right? Well, nature's got its own version of that, and it'll leave you scratching your heads. So, in the Philippines, you'll find the world's largest island within a lake on an island within a lake on an island. Am I stressing your brain out yet? Yeah, okay. Let me break it down for you. Vulcan Point is an island in Main Crater Lake, which is on Volcano Island, also known as Taal Island, located in Lake Taal on Luzon Island. Got that? Now it gets even crazier. Vulcan Point is also part of the active Taal volcano. So it's not just the largest island in a lake, it is the largest volcano in a lake on a volcano in a lake on an island. You still following me? Good, because geography's got another twisted one up its sleeve. Have you ever confused Bucharest with Budapest? Well, you're not alone. In simple terms, Bucharest is Romania's capital, located along the Dâmbovița River. It's known for its historic charm and the huge palace of the parliament. Meanwhile, Budapest, the capital of Hungary, is enchanted with its thermal baths and grand architecture. Though the names sound alike, these cities have distinct histories and cultures. Their proximity in Central Europe adds to the mix-up, but each has its own unique story. Believe it or not, there's a spot in Yellowstone where you could theoretically get away with murder. It's called the Zone of Death, a 50 square mile patch of land in Idaho's portion of the park where legal loopholes come into play. Here's how it works. Or doesn't. The Sixth Amendment says you have to be tried by a jury made up of people from both the state and district where a crime occurred. But since this area is in Idaho, and the entire park is under Wyoming's jurisdiction, forming a jury is impossible. Thankfully, no one's tested the loophole. Yet. Maybe I shouldn't have told you. Don't commit murder in Yellowstone. It's a PSA. Time zones work in mysterious ways, my friends. Why does France have the most time zones of any country on Earth? Boasting at least 12, it sounds startling. However, things aren't what they seem. The time zone rule applies to French territory as much as the country itself. For instance, a French time is observed on islands found in various oceans, so they get to rack up those zones and take the time zone crown. In Russia, you can say goodnight while someone else is just having breakfast in bed, all within the same country. That's because Russia stretches across 11 time zones. Why so many? It's not about the prime meridian, it's about sheer size. Russia spans a jaw-dropping 160 degrees of longitude, from Europe all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Since each time zone covers roughly 15 degrees, Russia naturally fits into 11 of them. Well, this is what you get when you're a country that covers more than 17 million square kilometers. That's about 11% of all land on Earth. So sunrise in Moscow could mean midnight in Kamchatka. If you pulled up a map to look at Russia's size, well, bravo. But maybe hold that applause, because our next fact might make you question everything you thought you knew about those world maps. Rio de Janeiro gets all the glory, but Brazil's capital isn't the Carnival hub you're thinking of. It's Brasilia. In 1960, Brazil shifted its capital inland. The goal was to escape Rio's shadow and spark growth in the heart of the country. But here's something that caught my interest. The architectural maestro Oscar Niemeyer and planner Lucio Costa designed the masterpiece we now know as Brasilia. This state-of-the-art modernist design is shaped like an airplane from above. But this bold move wasn't just about aesthetics, it aimed to balance power, decentralizing Brazil's economy and political focus from its coastal giants. Papua New Guinea has always been a bit of a mystery. It used to be known as that place with cannibals and unexplored landscapes, but the cannibalism part is long gone. That said, much of the land is still untapped and hard to reach. The Wildlife Conservation Society explored the Hindenburg Wall, the massive limestone plateau, in 2013, and over 1,100 species, 89 of which were completely new to science, were discovered to be living there. In 2010, an expedition to the Nakanai Mountains found new species of frogs, insects, and spiders. So new that scientists had to create entirely new classifications for them. With so much left to explore, especially underwater, Papua New Guinea is definitely one of the last frontiers. Deep in the heart of Texas has never sounded more appropriate. There's, theoretically, room for the entire population of Earth, some 8 billion souls in cowboy country. It's sparsely inhabited compared to a lot of places, which is exactly how the Texans like it. In a global catastrophe, however, they'd need to saddle up and make room for the displaced billions. A situation I'm sure would just run as smooth as a single malt whiskey on the rocks. You know that objects in mirror are closer than they appear warning? Yeah, maps kind of need something like that too. Take Greenland, for example. It looks almost the same size as Africa, but in reality, Africa's over 14 times bigger. Another example, Alaska often appears larger than Mexico, but Mexico is actually bigger, so what's the deal? It's all thanks to the Mercator projection, a map style that stretches land near the poles to keep shapes and directions accurate. That's why countries closer to the equator look smaller than they are. So while your map does help you get around, don't always trust its sense of scale. It's more artistic than accurate. We're almost wrapping this up, and hey, congrats on making it this far. Now, for these last three, you might want to buckle up. Despite their shared glory as major European capitals, Copenhagen and Amsterdam are not neighbors. They belong to two different countries. Copenhagen reigns as Denmark's capital in Scandinavia, while Amsterdam leads the Netherlands in Western Europe. Well, these cities are over 400 miles apart, and each has its unique languages, cultures, and governments. Time zones make perfect sense. Until they don't. They've helped make our days more predictable, but they can get downright weird. And the Diomede Islands are a perfect example. Separated by just 2 miles in the Bering Strait, Big Diomede belongs to Russia and Little Diomede to the USA. Despite their close distance from each other, they are 21 hours apart because of the international date line. So, if you're on Big Diomede, you could speedboat to Little Diomede and arrive yesterday, then head back and return to tomorrow. Classic time zone chaos. There are some very remote places in the vast expanse of the US, with the most out there town being Glasgow. It takes over 4 hours to get there by road. Better bring your video games for the kids. And also prepare for the longest game of I Spy you will ever experience in your life. You'll appreciate it once you're away from that smoky air and the wilds of true rural America. When you're house hunting, one of the first things you check is the water supply, right? Because living where there's no flowing water at all is a big no. But that's just a house. Saudi Arabia is a country, and given its size, it's the largest country in the world that's without a single river. Well, in all fairness, the country is mostly desert and rarely gets any rainfall, so instead of rivers, you'll find dry riverbeds that only fill with water when there's a heavy downpour. Other than that, they've got no permanent flowing river at all. But the country still thrives? How? Well, to get by, Saudi Arabia uses methods like tapping into underground aquifers or even going so far as to import water to keep things running smoothly. Let's leave the Arabian sand dunes behind and head to a continent with one of the coolest maps. But it might not stay that way for long. Do you think the Nile is the world's longest river? Well, think again. Recent measurements announced South America's Amazon as the true champion. It stretches roughly 4,345 miles. Though the numbers vary depending on how you define its starting point. The Nile, on the other hand, flowing through northeastern Africa, traditionally claims about 4,160 miles. However, the debate boils down to how each river's length is calculated, especially when counting their many tributaries. Remember those places with the long names I mentioned earlier? Well, did you know there's a flip side to this coin? Places with just one-letter names. A classic example is River Dee in Oregon. This tiny waterway, just 120 feet long, sparked a decades-long battle with the Guinness World Records to be recognized as the shortest river. In 2006, Guinness dropped the record, leaving Dee lovers with a moral victory. And Dee isn't alone. There's Ål, a village in Norway, a village in Denmark, and a few other places with single-letter names scattered across Scandinavia. So yes, sometimes less really is more. That's the number of bridges a train will cross when it's traveling over the Trans-Siberian Railway. The icy journey covers 5,772 miles, going from Moscow into the center of the city of Vladivostok near the Chinese border. Remember how continents can actually move? Well, right now, Africa is slowly splitting in two. Right in Eastern Africa, there's a crack in the Earth's crust, which is basically the continent tearing itself apart. They're calling it the Eastern African Rift. This rift has two branches. There's the Eastern Rift running into northern Tanzania, and the Western one, which passes through Uganda, all the way to Mozambique, and is slowly causing the land to separate. Emphasis on the word slowly, so you don't just panic. The process is hardly noticeable, but in millions of years, it is going to create a new ocean between the two parts. It's like Africa is going through the longest natural breakup. Now, for staying with us for this long, the last fact for you to flaunt as an expert brings you right to the center of it all. When you think of the name Iran, you probably think of rich Islamic culture, nuclear bombs, and endless deserts with scorching heat. But what most people don't know is the winters get really cold over there. Temperatures in January and February can drop as low as 4 degrees Celsius. That's 39 degrees Fahrenheit for my Fahrenheit friends. And at this time, you'll find snow in the mountains. Yes, I'm still talking about Iran. In fact, and I know this doesn't fit the stereotype, Iran has ski resorts. So the next time you hear about Iran, think beyond the heat. It's a land of extremes. And I'm not just talking about the weather. When we look at a world map, we don't usually stop and question its accuracy. We trust the map. It's something we rely on daily, so it must be right, right? Well, unfortunately, the world map isn't accurate at all. It heavily exaggerates the size of the Northern Hemisphere. For instance, Greenland looks just as big as Africa, but Africa's actually 14 and a half times bigger. In fact, most continents south of the equator appear much smaller than they actually are. This happens because the Mercator projection map stretches and distorts Earth's round shape when it's turned into a flat 2D image. So, the next time you look at a map, remember, what you see isn't exactly what you get. Now this is Bond villain stuff. Should you wish to turn the planet into a giant gold nugget, chances are you could. This is due to where we find the Earth's gold in the first place, namely inside the world's core. A reported 99% of all that glitters can be traced down there. Melt it down and you'd apparently have more than enough for a shiny gold coating. It's been worked out that the resulting layer would be a startling 1.5 foot thick. If you had a giant map of the world and could place a pin right in the center of all the land, where would it land? Well, geographers wanted to too. And the answer? Turkey. Specifically near the small town of Kızılderili in central Turkey lies the geographic center of all Earth's landmasses. Now, how did scientists figure this out? Back in 1973, Andrew J. Woods, a physicist with Gulf Energy and Environmental Systems in San Diego, California, used a digital global map and calculated the coordinates to pinpoint this exact location, the balance point of all the Earth's landmasses. To clear things up, it doesn't necessarily mean the center of every single point on Earth, but just rather the simple average central point of all the land on the planet when plotted on a map. So the next time you're visiting Turkey, just know that you're standing in the place where the whole world's landmasses meet. How cool does that sound?